Hello everybody, welcome to a new episode of Reinvent Money Show. My name is Paul Buitink and my co-host is Richard van der Linden, who tried to start a full reserve bank in Holland called the Deposito Bank. Our guest today is a very special one who I've been wanting to have on the show for a very long time, and his name is Stefan Zarlenga. Stefan is a monetary historian and a director of the American Monetary Institute. He wrote a book, The Lost Science of Money, which I have here. It's a must-read for every monetary student. And we're going to talk about the book today, but also about a lot more. Mr. Zarlenga, or Stefan, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Paul and Alan.
So, your book, I read it again on holidays, actually, in January when I was in Vietnam. And what was your inspiration to write this piece?
Well, the inspiration for this type of thing is always private, frankly, and but it was a good, powerful inspiration, and it got me to do it. And I don't usually talk about the inspiration, why I did it, but I had a very strong commitment to do it, and it was based originally on a promise I made to my father back when he passed away in 1982. And I promised him I would write the book, and I promised him more at the time. And we're working on the second half of that promise now. The book is done. It took 12 years. It took a lot longer than I thought. Had I known what it was going to require, I would have never been able to start it. But once you're into it 5 or 6 years, you're stuck. You can't stop, and you have to finish the job. And that's what I did. And well, you may remember it's right at the front of the book. There's the picture of the Tower of Hercules in Coruña, Spain.
Yes.
The Tower of Hercules, which is the oldest functioning lighthouse in the Western world, and that's where I made him the promise. He had died in Chicago right then. I was on a sailing trip from Brighton to the Mediterranean, and it's been again. I would have never done it had I known what it was going to take. But once you start and seriously do it, you have to finish it. So I did. And you have the book there now, and I'm glad of that. Richard, you don't have a copy. I'll send you another copy.
That would be great.
Paul has a copy. Paul, you know what the book looks like. Now, I have to tell you, fellows, the book is also being stolen on the internet. Actually, some people scanned it and put it up, and that was so destructive, so destructive, because about 1/3 of our income usually comes from book sales. Another third of it comes from our conference, the September conference, and we also sell videos, a video of that conference, and a part of it comes from that.
Yeah. But Mr. Stefan, do you also think that some people maybe read it? I hear myself twice. I hear an echo.
Well,
I hear an echo, but it's, yeah, it's gone. That maybe some people read it online, possibly the pirated version, but then they're so they like it so much that then decide to purchase it in a hard copy as well.
Only the moral people do that.
Right.
So it's a problem for us. We don't know how to solve it. We thought we would do a what's it called, an ebook version of it, so that we could offer it for less money, because you have the book. You know, it's a complete first class production. You've got the jacket, for example, is double-coated, super thick. Eventually, the jackets wear out, and the jacket is again on the board of the book. The paper in the book, oh, it's a thick book, by the way.
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
The paper is 300-year eternal paper.
And is there a particular reason that you decided to sell it solely from your website and not through the regular retail channels?
Yes, a lot of reasons. I've had experience in publishing books. I published about 20 books over the years. I didn't write them. This one I wrote, and I understood book publishing, and that you do not make a lot of money publishing books. Counter to the beliefs of most authors, they think, oh, they'll finish their book and their life is ready, they're all made. It doesn't work that way. Books are really very hard to make money with. But the idea was that if we had it published by the American Monetary Institute, the full income from the book would be coming back to us, which could then be reinvested in continuing to promote the book. And that generally is a good idea and works. When you publish in the normal world with book distributors and bookstores, that really does not function well for most authors. It can't. So I knew about that, and we stuck with that correctly.
Okay. Well, let's move to something that I've been involved with also quite a lot lately. Not so much as being part of the organization, but I've been interviewing quite a few people of Positive Money in the UK. To what extent? Did they were they inspired by your book, or were you involved in the early discussions around Positive Money?
Hold on one moment. I'm going to get one sheet of paper that you had sent me. I have it in front of me. I should have already had it. Where is it? I'm back. Can't find it. So you asked about Positive Money?
Yeah, were you one of their architects, or because their proposals they resemble very much your book, and your book, of course, was released more than 10 years ago, and they have been around for a few years. So, can you tell me a bit more about your connection?
We were the very first ones, and we put out the book, and then began to work on the actual reform. The Institute, American Monetary Institute, the purpose is the independent study of monetary history, theory, and reform. Now, in order to understand the subject, first you have to do the history part. Without that, you're adrift. You have no idea what has happened in the past. So we've done that, and that is in the book. And the theory comes out in that same discussion, and then comes the reform part. So what the book does, I will answer your question. It has 23, the first 23 chapters are the case studies. What are the facts? What's the past of money? And then chapter 24 takes that knowledge and says very simply, all right, with those case studies and what we learn about the nature of money, and that is the main question. What is the nature of money? That's the key question that the economists have done such a terrible job on. That's the key question to know about the next stage, which is reform. You have to have a concept and understanding of the nature of money before you can figure out how to reform it. It's that simple. What are you trying to reform? In order to do that, you've got to know what it is. And we're now at that stage, the monetary reform stage. And so chapter 24 of the book says, all right, here's what we've learned. How do we apply that to the present situation? And we do that, and out of that exercise, out of chapter 24, came what we call the American Monetary Act, which then became the basis for Congressman Dennis Kucinich's, what he calls the NEED Act, N-E-E-D, which is short for National Emergency Employment Defense Act. Congressman Kucinich, one of the great heroes of the United States, and he introduced this NEED Act into the 112th Congress in 2011, which has made history. It's the first time it's been done in the 225-year history of the United States to have actual, correct, true monetary reform introduced into the Congress. Now, this is a very big deal. It is, in order for him to do that, you see, when you have a bill that's a complex bill, and this is relatively complex, it goes, in America, it has to go through what is called legislative council. This is nonpartisan. It's neither Republican or Democratic. And these are experts who look at the proposed legislation. They figure out what else has to change among the existing laws for this new legislation to be operated. That took about 2.5 years. And we focused on that with Congressman Kucinich, and it got done. Got to the point where he could introduce it into the Congress. It is there. It was introduced into the 112th Congress. When a bill does not pass in the Congress, it ends, but it can be reintroduced into any new Congress. It is now ready on the shelf. Any congressman, and that means either a senator or a representative, can take it off the shelf and reintroduce it.
Right, and what is the link to the NEED Act and positive money?
Say it again.
Yeah, sorry, there's this echo.
I didn't hear you, Paul. Say it one more time, Paul.
Yeah. So, what is the link between the NEED Act and the plans of positive money? Did they kind of use parts of the content?
I'm giving you the background on us. Now, positive money started some years after us, and they're doing a great job of promoting in the UK. And one of the people who worked with us very closely also worked with them very closely, and his name is Jamie Walton. Jamie Walton, who comes here, he's here about half the year, usually. He's back in New Zealand right now, but he worked with them quite a bit and helped them to structure their program in terms of the legal aspects of it and the structure of it. So that's perhaps one of the reasons for that similarity. But there are also, I think, important differences.
Right. Well, let's talk a bit about the essence of the NEED Act and of the essence of your book. Basically, in your book, you make it very clear that, according to your historical research, that money is an abstract legal power of society, embodied in law, an unconditional means of payment. Could you tell a bit about why it is important for the society to understand that and see money as such?
Yes. Actually, the title of the book, The Lost Science of Money, derives from this. And essentially, Aristotle introduced the science of money in the 4th century BC. And he did this by pointing out the concept of money. What he said is very simply, it's in one sentence, and this is an exact quote: money exists not by nature, but by law. Now, what does that mean? So money is, in Aristotle's concept, is not something that comes naturally out of a mine or out of a farm. It's a legal creature. It's created by us, and it's a principle that can exist within the law. Now, when you look at the various monies that have been in existence, whether they're made out of paper or coin or whatever material they are, Aristotle's concept basically holds true. It has always been the law that makes them money. And what we did with the book, what we do is we trace this concept. We show how a society will discover this concept of money, and this concept will aid that society. It can grow and prosper. And what happens is that eventually, because there's so much power within a monetary system, those who are trying to control the society by means of power, they will corrupt the money system for their own purposes. It will eventually then fall apart, taking the society down with it. So the science is lost, and then it gets rediscovered, either much later within that society or by another society. And the other society will then grow and prosper and come to dominate again. So that was the name of the book, The Lost Science of Money, because studying this over history, you see a pattern where it is discovered by society, helps that society grow and prosper, is lost to that society through corruption, and is then rediscovered somewhere else. And you see this from Greece, you see this from Rome. In our own case, in the United States, the science was rediscovered in Massachusetts in what was the year 1620. Actually, before the Bank of England started, the Bank of England also rediscovered this, but that was in the 1690s, and also discovered it in a corrupted form, used it in a corrupted form. So that's this concept of the lost science of money, and the book is about 800 pages, and I'm going to read the definition of money. The definition of money is not arrived at until this part here, which is page 656. It required that much effort before we were in a position to define it, because otherwise, here, you don't know what you're talking about at this part until you've seen it in operation. So I'll just read some of these key conclusions about money that go throughout history. From Aristotle, quote, money exists not by nature, but by law, unquote. From Plato, and Plato and Aristotle actually agreed, uncharacteristically, they completely agreed on money. From Plato, quote, a money token for purposes of exchange, unquote. From about 300 AD, from Julius Paulus, a jurisconsul of the Roman Empire, quote, this device being officially promulgated, circulated, and maintained its purchasing power, not so much from its substance as from its quantity, unquote. And then you have a long, long darkness. And then from Bishop Berkeley, an Anglican bishop of Coin, Ireland, quote, whether the true idea of money as such be not altogether that of a ticket or counter, unquote. From Locke and Franklin, who viewed money as a pledge for wealth rather than wealth itself. And then from Alexander Del Mar, the greatest monetary historian, we have a complete definition. Quote, What is commonly understood as money has always consisted tangibly of a number of pieces of some material, marked by public authority and named or understood in the laws or customs, that its palpable characteristic was its mark of authority, its essential characteristic, the possession of value defined by law, and its function, the legal power to pay debts and taxes, and the mechanical power to facilitate the exchange of objects possessing value. There's only one more from Nat, German fellow, in about 1900. Our test that the money is accepted in payments made to the state's offices.
Yeah.
And then we devised our own definition, the American Monetary Institute. We accept these concepts and add, quote, money's essence, apart from whatever is used to signify it, is an abstract social power embodied in law as an unconditional means of payment, end of quote.
Right.
So,
but there seems also to be a lot of debate on the internet at the moment.
Say it again?
There also seems a lot of debate at the moment on the internet on what actually gives money value. And there's a recent paper from monetary historian Farley Grubb, for instance. Farley Grubb? Grubb. He did a research. He wrote a paper on the Virginia colonial money. And what he found was that the government actually passed several acts to issue paper notes that all included the so-called final redemption dates, and additionally new taxes that also matched the redemption dates of that notes. So what he basically claims is that it's the taxation that actually gives that money value, because at the time there weren't enough coins from the UK, from the kingdom, and when Virginia actually issued those notes, the only way to get those accepted, to his claim, is that because there also was a taxation involved with it. Would you agree on that?
I would not agree with Grubb. I don't even know who he is. That's the first I've heard of him, basically, except in an email Paul mentioned it. But
okay.
It's been, what can I say? This has long been known that that last statement is not correct. If Grubb says that, it is not the acceptance for taxation that gives money value. What gives money value, and this is so important, of the existence of people working in a society, creating values for living, working in a society which has sufficient legal and social infrastructure, in other words, which has a good legal system in operation, and within that system there are people like us working, creating values for life, values that we want. Now, where that statement goes wrong is quite simply the acceptance of money for taxation, acceptance of something for taxation is what makes something money, but it doesn't give it value. The value comes out of the people doing the work and creating things. The thing becoming money is that the government will accept it for taxation. But this has nothing to do with Grubb or research. I don't know where he's coming from, because this was well known. This is a key condition of, what's his name? I mentioned his name already. George Nat, the German writer, who wrote in 1905 that this is his condition. I just mentioned it to you, that the state officers accept it.
So basically you're saying...
Yeah. Now,
so you're saying that the taxation was not necessary?
That didn't get translated into English until the 1920s. But it was in existence in 1905 in German, and it got translated into English thanks, believe it or not, to, what's his name? Keynes.
John Maynard Keynes.
Keynes asked that be translated. So Keynes actually did something good.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically you're saying that they could as well have the money issued without the taxation and it would still be accepted as a legal currency because it was state issued.
No, not necessarily. You see, the fact that it's state issued gives it a buyer or an acceptor of last resort.
Right.
Now, what that means is that it makes it much easier for people to exchange it with one another because they know that they can always use it as a last resort to pay those taxes.
Yeah.
So having an acceptor of last resort is an important thing on money.
Yeah, but not necessary.
Well, in some conditions it might be necessary, but I wouldn't consider that the whole picture. And if I were looking at that as the main reason, I would not look to Grub, who I don't know what he knows about this at all. I would look to KNAPP, K-N-A-P-P.
Right.
Really a good, solid theorist, and not especially Grub or the MMT people or the University of Missouri Kansas City people. They should look more to NAT. If they did that, they would not be making some of the errors that they're making of defining money as debt. Because right. Nat's book has various definitions of money. There's a problem with Nat's book in that his terminology, he basically created it for what he was doing, and it's very, very complex. But he discusses credit used as money. Mm-hmm. He discusses precious metals used as money. He discusses paper used as money. In other words, he'll discuss 30 or 40 different types of money. And
is it really useful to use so many?
It's useful in the ideas or in the theorizing and figuring out what money is. It's a valuable work from that. It would be useful to the MMT people. They might understand that their whole focus on credit debt as money is just one possible form of money. Now, the problem is that is the form that is currently in vogue, being used around the world. I think it's what you're using there in Holland, it's what we're using in America, it's what's being used in the UK.
You mean the bank credit?
Yes, bank-created debt. Using debt in, I'll phrase it this way. We're not using money. We're using debt in place of money. Now, your reformers there, who I watched at the parliamentary hearing, the 2 hours of that, they're really good people. I wrote their names down here. Let's see.
Yeah, they go by that name, the Ons Geld, our money foundation.
Wortman, are you connected with Ons Geld?
Yeah, with Edgar Wortman.
You're doing a great job there. Wortman was really good. Van Hoots, really good.
Van Hoots,
Egmond, really great. And Hogan was pretty good too. You've got some good people there. And you know what I noticed? They're all young. We don't have young people like that in America.
How old are you, Mr. How old are you, Stephen?
Most of the parliamentarians are young. Ours are,
Yeah. Like Stefan, can I ask you how old you are?
Anyway, I was very encouraged to see that, and I think you have to follow your own, use the word instinct. It's not really instinct. You have to follow your own thinking in going for reform and not worry so much about others, because your people have the right judgment. And you know your own country better than anyone else, and what you have to overcome.
There seems to be a lot of support for a state-issued currency, like the people you just mentioned. They plead for in the government hearing. But the biggest issues is that we are in the euro, in the monetary union, and so that gives us not all the freedom that you would need to actually get to this sovereign currency. So given that it is something that you cannot that cannot be undone very soon, how would you advise Dutch policymakers to go about it, to create policy up to the point where you actually can exit this monetary union? Is there something that can be done in between, like the coming 10 years? Like perhaps a 100% reserve requirement? Would it be a temporary solution that you would support?
I've already written about this, and you have the book there, Paul. It's in chapter 23 of my book, which was on the euro before, at the time it was just being introduced. In 2003 that came out. But I point out in there the problem with the euro, which is now being felt dramatically by all of Europe. And they made a couple of errors, and they're both very carefully described in chapter 23 of the book. You can see that. Briefly, they did not define money. Nowhere in the euro documents do you find a concise definition of money. And having not done that, they did not properly define how they would increase the money supply within the euro zone. And that is the problem. They don't have a good way of increasing the amount of money in the system. So it's waiting where there's not enough money, which I would say present situation is. There's not enough money in the hands of the people. There might be enough in the hands of the banks, but that doesn't help things always. If you can work on that, since you're in the euro, and you have to stay in the euro is not going to fall. The euro is there. It's a permanent thing. I see Americans thinking, oh, the euro is going to fall, or Brits are saying, no, the euro can fall. They don't know what they're talking about. The euro is the result partly of 2 world wars.
Right.
And the desire of the Europeans to never have that happen.
Yeah,
Stefan. It won't happen again. It won't happen again. So what you need to do, fellas, is reform the euro. You're in it now. The Brits eventually should come into the euro. There's no chance that they're going to leave the euro now, believe it or not, with the Brexit, because it's just too damaging. That just reflects like what I would call... So
positive money should focus on the euro, basically.
Pardon?
Sorry, yeah, so positive money should focus on the euro, basically, and not on a country level. Is that what you're saying?
Who should?
All the positive money movements that you see throughout Europe, they should actually combine their forces and focus on the euro, not so much on their own country.
Your group is not called Positive Money, though, is it?
No, it's quite similar. It's a branch of Positive Money. It has the similar website and uses the same materials.
But you were not started by Positive Money.
No, it has started as an independent branch and then teamed up with Positive Money, I think. Am I right, Paul?
That's the way I would do it. You see, part of the reason, Richard, is money is still a national issue. Money is not an international issue because it's a question of law. And
you have the fiscal bodies.
We don't have that kind of international law where you can have an international currency. Someone mentioned that one of the things you wanted to talk about was international currency. There truly is no such thing. The closest thing to an international currency would be the SDRs, special drawing rights of the International Monetary Fund. And that truly can become an important thing because Yes, the International Monetary Fund, you may not know, it's a part of the United Nations. It's within the United Nations. Now, the United Nations doesn't really have much say or control over it, but it is structured within the United Nations, and it can become a very important way to settle international balances. Which used to be settled with even with gold movements of gold, when there was the pretense that gold was the money system was based on gold. It never really was, but at this time, the SDR, which has been called paper gold, does or can, under a proper reform of the International Monetary Fund, whereby it is no longer simply a collection agent for the big banks, which is what it has been far too much. It's been the enforcement agent against smaller countries that get into debt to the banks, and that can be reformed, and the SDR can play a part in that process of being an internationally accepted means of settling balances. But my view is that your Ons Geld movement should move forward as an Ons Geld movement, not as anything else, not as some foreign group. Because again, you people know your own system better than anyone else. Others do not know what to do necessarily in your system. I wouldn't try to tell you. All I'm telling you is that when I see those Wortman and Van Hoots and Van Egmond speaking, I'm thinking these guys are good. Follow them, help them, empower them. Not anything external. And there's another problem with an external. What happens if they make an error? What happens if their reform, if they don't stick to the reform that they've published?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do you think that the sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Stefan, another question. A lot of young people, especially, they live on the internet, they live online, they travel through the world. They don't necessarily feel they're a part of any country, and they want to use their own types of currencies, and they come up with new currencies like Bitcoin. Do you think Bitcoin can be considered as money as well? And what do you think is the future of non-state currencies?
You poor kids. This question is not that, the question of currency, having a good money system is not that complicated. Don't make it more complicated. It's complicated enough. Do not make it more complicated than it is. Bitcoin, what is Bitcoin? Who the hell knows? Do you understand the logarithms or algorithms they're called that go into creating? Do you know who created it?
Well, most people use electricity without understanding how it works exactly as well. That's not necessarily a reason for it to not function.
Paul, they know the engineers who do understand it. You don't know anybody who understands Bitcoin or who understands who created it, for what purpose, who does it help.
Well, the developers taking care of the protocol, and people trust the developers to take care of it well. And so far, they've been doing it. But I think it's more the point, like, it doesn't have to be Bitcoin per se, but more the philosophical understanding of whether it would be what's the state, and can people form their virtual states and create their own currencies within their virtual communities without having to be bound to geographical borders, for example?
Quick answer: no.
Okay.
Sorry. And Bitcoin may have been started by the NSA, National Security Agency of the United States. If that's the case, go to our Google list page and search for there's an article on there about Bitcoin from a couple of years ago. it probably was started by the National Security Agency of the United States. And if that's the case, I think maybe this was potentially started when budgets were being cut dramatically. And that would mean that not only the public's budgets that would be cut, but probably the what are called black budgets were also cut. You know what a black budget is? Those are the secret.
Yeah, we don't have those in Europe. You only have those in the US.
Good. Anyway, if those things were being cut, and these characters, these dark, shady characters, wanted to keep paying their personnel, maybe they gave them bitcoins. We don't know. We really don't. Watch out. Watch out. Be careful. The money solution is not that complex. Don't make it overly complex. But when you find it, as you guys have, from what I've seen, and I haven't seen the details of what Ons Geld is proposing, but looking at the principles and listening to Van Egland and Van Roots and Wortman, these are good people.
Yeah.
And go forward. Now, you ask what the NEED Act does, and I'm going to tell you because it's very simple. It solves the problem with 3 actions, and all 3 actions are necessary in order for it to work. 1 or 2 of them won't do it. You need all 3. 3 major actions. It's got about 10 different things that it does. But the 3 biggest things are, number 1, it nationalizes the Federal Reserve System. Now, the Federal Reserve System is the agency in Washington, which has no shares, it's just an agency, and the 12 Federal Reserve banks spread around the country, which have shares, and they're owned by the banks within each district. Okay, so the first step of the NEED Act, and this is Congressman Kucinich's bill, is to, and I use the word nationalize the Federal Reserve System. People in politics don't like that word nationalize, so they use the word incorporate the Federal Reserve banks into the U.S. Treasury. All right, that's the first part. That means that any money created by the Federal Reserve System is in fact created by our government.
Right.
Right. And that's a major, major step. Okay, that's one. But that's not enough.
Yeah, and that's similar to what positive money wants.
Good.
Yeah.
Now, positive money doesn't have to do that because the Bank of England was already nationalized in 1946.
True.
See, after World War II. And that's in the book too.
Yeah.
Now, you may not guess. What religion is Holland, by the way?
What's that?
What religion is Holland?
It's secular.
Secular, mostly. Good.
Yeah.
But are you Calvinist or are you? You're not Anglican, obviously. You're not Catholic.
No, we're Christian. Protestant.
Oh, okay. So are the Calvinists and Catholics in theory. All right, this is a picture, Paul, in your book on page 570 of the man who got the Bank of England nationalized after World War II.
Right.
And it's the Archbishop of Canterbury, believe it or not, the head, basically the Pope of the Anglican Church. And I guess 2 world wars and 1 Great Depression were too much, so he called for the nationalization of the Bank of England, and he had a fantastic phrase, a one-page speech that he gave, and his phrase was, "What should be the servant has become the master."
Right. And what? Let's also to kind of keep track of the time. What would be the next step of the NEED Act?
Okay. I'm going too slow. Just do this, then I'll move.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have like 10 minutes left.
How many minutes?
Well, we're almost in. I would like to close around the hour or so. So 10 more minutes.
I've got a clock here, and I'll keep that in mind. All right. So first step, we nationalized the bank, the Federal Reserve System. We know that's not enough. How do we know? Because the Brits nationalized their banking, their Bank of England in 1946, but they understood that they shouldn't do this. The Archbishop understood, that they shouldn't, but they allowed the banks to continue creating money. They allowed the fractional reserve system to continue in existence. Now, we understand after the war that the government was creating as much as a third or maybe even half, we don't know, I don't know exactly, let's say a third of the money was being created by the government through the nationalized Bank of England. But the rest was being created by the banks when they made loans. Same as now. Well, the banks knew what to do with this power. And so today, in England, banks are creating 97% of all the money. Same as over here. Same as probably in Holland.
Yeah. You propose to abolish the fractional reserve banking protocol.
That's the second part of the act, because simply nationalizing the central bank doesn't do it. We know that from experience. You cannot ignore the lessons of history and repeat them and expect better results.
Right.
So part two, we end the fractional reserve system decisively, completely. No,
like the Chicago plan proposes.
We don't let you keep 10% of the ability to create money. We don't let you keep half the ability to create money. Zero.
Yeah.
It has to be absolute. If you leave them 10%, they're smart enough and powerful enough and have enough money over time to build that up to 97% again.
Right.
That's
similar to the Chicago plan, right? What you propose. That is similar to the Chicago plan, what you propose.
Which plan?
It is similar to the Chicago plan.
Oh, yeah. The Chicago plan does those two things.
Right.
And that's where we got them from. And I have a tradition of carrying forward the Chicago plan. I graduated from the University of Chicago in 1963.
Wow.
The Chicago plan came out of the University of Chicago, out of Maynard Hutchins. I was in the very final class using the Hutchins curriculum in the University of Chicago. There's that definite direct connection between the Chicago plan and me and what we're doing. And that's part two. We stopped decisively all fractional reserve banking. Banks can no longer loan. We stopped using debt in place of money. Now, further, there's a third part that we know is necessary. And again, this comes from experience. Because in the United States in the 1830s, President Andrew Jackson and Vice President Martin Van Buren, who has been at our headquarters, it's a one-room schoolhouse in existence at the time of his retirement in his neighborhood. He's been there at that schoolhouse at our headquarters at some point. They basically did the equivalent of what those first two proposals in the 1830s. Not with the Federal Reserve, there wasn't, but the equivalent institutions, that's what they did. And they created the worst depression that had ever existed in the United States up till that time, because they stopped the banks from creating what was used for money. They're not really creating money. They're creating debt. They're creating what we use for money, the debt. That's the mistake. Those two guys, President Jackson, Vice President Van Buren, stopped the banks from creating what we use for money and neglected to do something in its place. They neglected to have the government start creating money. And so they created a huge deflation and depression. And thus, therefore, we know part 3 of our bill is needed. Part 3, the government, the Congress, and this power stays in the Congress. It must. You try to take it out of the Congress, you never do anything. The Congress is encouraged to create and spend real money, not debt, money, and spend it into the economy. Not loan it into the economy, spend it into the economy, starting with the $3 trillion that the engineers tell us we need to spend over the next 5 years to modernize our infrastructure.
Would you call it a deficit if they spend it?
It's money. There's no deficit. It's not borrowed.
Okay. But you do keep track of the score, right?
It's an important concept, and you'll get it, but you have to stop thinking of money as debt. Okay. If you're thinking of money as debt, you're right, there's a deficit.
Well, you asked me, it seems like a semantic discussion if I read about all the different schools of thought.
It's a discussion of words, but these words mean things. This is why the MMT and that the guy Bessemer at your parliamentary hearing, they're so totally destructive because they have no real concept of money. Without understanding the nature of money, they don't understand what society can do.
But they propose to spend as well. They propose to spend as well on the infrastructure, on education,
No, all the power that you see concentrated in the financial sector right now. Who's driving all the limousines in your country besides movie stars or singers? It's the finance people. Nobody else. This country as well. All around the world. All of that wealth comes from taking over society's monetary power. We take that power back, and all of that wealth can then be used for the betterment of the people. Now, in America, there are critical things we need that you are smart enough in Europe to have. You've got health care. We don't have health care. Can you imagine a society without health care? Americans don't get vacations at work. Can you imagine that? Now, no. You can't. So see, all of these things can happen through...
I think my question is, and I'm really curious, what you propose is that the government takes the sovereign right to issue money, not as a deficit, but would it be any different from issuing bonds at a zero or close to zero interest rate, and then spend the money on the same projects? Would there be a big difference in the outcome?
Well, I think you're complicating it, because why issue bonds that don't pay interest? People, they expect some interest. You're adding in an extra process. Probably it would be similar, but maybe you're overcomplicating it.
Okay.
Well, Stefan, before we reach the end of the show, because we're already... How many more steps are there left for you to...
Paul, if you want to do this again, Paul, if you need another hour, I'm happy to do this. It's been fun.
I got a question from the audience, Stefan. Johan Zelstra asks Mrs. Zarlenga, and I think that's an interesting question to end with. How can we inspire people to get involved in a money subject? People usually don't want to think about it and think it's a dull subject and do not think it would affect them much. So how can we motivate people to read your book or read other books, or to have these kinds of discussions about money?
Stay with the reality of it. Very good point. Very good question. Don't water it down. Don't compromise in advance. Don't make those kind of mistakes. That only turns people off. Stay with the reality of it and the big picture of it, and how important this is. And in other words, be exciting. Don't be and stay away from economics. Stay away from economics. They have been the most overpaid, besides the bankers. I mean, you know, the economists have been terrible. They have not helped society. They have not solved this problem. I'm not an economist. Our best people are not economists. They're engineers. Engineers have to do things that work. They build a bridge. It has to be more than a theory. It has to actually stand up.
Right. Yeah, well, I think I agree a lot with what you say, and also the book is a very interesting read. And there's a lot of echo. I have to apologize to our listeners about the echoes and the bad quality of sound. It usually isn't this bad, so apologies for that. But Stefan, thanks so much for being on the show. Where can people order your book or read more about you and your work?
Okay. They can go to our website, which is monetary.org, and some of the things they can get there, these are things that are there free. There's a 32-page brochure which explains things beautifully. It's only 32 pages for the people who can't read an 800-page book or can't focus on that. This little thing has been called the best piece on monetary reform ever. There's a 2-page thing by Jamie Walton, the fellow that helped organize Positive Money's program, and it is how the Need Act gives an immediate, seamless, non-disruptive overnight transition from a crisis-prone bank debt system to a stable government money system. It's only 2 pages.
Right. And you're also organizing a conference this year. When will that be?
Oh, yeah. It's in September 29th, and that is at the homepage, monetary.org. You can see the picture, and you'll see the various speakers. We've got great speakers coming from Europe, particularly Joseph Huber, who you must interview sometime if you haven't yet. Joseph Huber of Germany, he's the top guy, and he wrote this fantastic paper on why the MMT is junk. Real junk, J-U-N-K.
I have the paper, and so do I have all your papers, but I have Joseph Huber's paper. Yeah. Right. It's definitely a good read.
You can find a refutation of Menger's theory of the origin of money. Menger is the founder of the Austrian school. They are monetarily illiterate, friends.
Yeah.
There's a piece from the Bank of England which basically agrees with our concept of money. Description of
I love to read
for your information, Stephen, I heard that Edgar Wortman might be attending your conference, so that might be something to look forward to.
Should I ask him to speak?
I definitely think he would be interested in that.
Well,
I'm sure we can connect you. Yeah.
Do please connect us, because I was thinking of that after seeing him. I don't do that too easily because we're very careful, and you've got to understand something. Why is it that 2,000 years after Aristotle figured this out, we still don't have monetary reform? And the reason is that a lot of the people who say they're for monetary reform are really doing something else, and we don't know exactly what, and I'm not going to theorize about that. But so we're very careful.
Right. Thank you very much.
My impression of Wortman was all positive watching him at that hearing, and I'm glad you fellows were there too. And my advice to you: go forward with what you're doing. Use your own decision-making process. Keep it local, because the monetary power is a local, usually a national problem, and even refining the euro will come out of the nation, and Holland is the logical one to do it.
Yeah. Well, we're a small country, so we can have a lot of we can get things done here because we're a small nation. So thanks for your encouraging words. I hear myself twice again. And let's do it again in the future and keep in touch, Stefan.
Anytime. Just let me know anytime.
Okay. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.